All right, welcome to your deep dive. We're going to be checking out some parts of the Quran that you picked out, specifically Surah Al-Mulk, which is chapter 67. We're going to be looking at God's power and creation and like the warnings that are given to people who don't believe. You want to go deeper than just like the surface, and that's what we're going to do.
Surah Al-Mulk is a pretty powerful chapter. It lays out some central Islamic beliefs in a really direct way. It's a good place to start for a deep dive.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Right from the first verse, it just hits you. Blessed is he in whose hand is the sovereignty and who has power over everything. I mean, that's how you open.
Yeah, there's no messing around. It establishes the core theme right away. There's no ambiguity. Like, God's just like has total authority over everything. It's the basis for everything that comes after that.
Right. And then it talks about how God created death and life as like a test to see, who's going to be the best. So it's not enough just to believe. You got to like actually do it too, right?
Yeah, actions matter. That's huge.
What would be considered good conduct according to the Quran?
That's a really great question. The Quran emphasizes actions that reflect submission to God's will, kindness to others, honesty, justice, striving for a moral life. We'll see all of that as we go through the chapter.
Yeah, okay. So verses 3 and 4 talk about the seven heavens and how nobody can see any flaws in that. It's like really emphasizing this idea of perfect creation.
The seven heavens are more than just like a physical space, though.
Right.
They symbolize the levels of spiritual ascension. It reflects like how perfect God's creation is. It's a reminder of like how vast existence really is, and like it goes way beyond what we can even see.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like the Quran's telling us to look deeper. Like to go beyond the surface, to try and understand, the real majesty of creation. And then there's verse 19, which talks about God holding the birds up in the sky. It's like God's power is everywhere around us, even in something as simple as a bird flying.
It's using the natural world to point to the divine. It's like, it's inviting us to see, to see God in the things that we see every day.
Right, but then it kind of changes. We go from all this beauty of creation to the warnings in verses 5 to 7. Stars become weapons, and hell is described so vividly. Like, what's going on with that?
You have to remember, that power of God we were talking about at the beginning.
Right.
This shows what happens when you reject that power. The imagery is like, I don't know, stark and powerful.
Yeah.
Meant to make you feel afraid. Hell it's described as roaring, seething. You can almost hear it and feel it.
Whoa, yeah, those verses are intense. It's like, it's meant to leave an impact.
Yeah,
it makes you think about, like what those choices really mean, right?
Absolutely. And that leads us to verses 8 through 11, where you have this dialogue in hell.
Yeah.
The people that are being punished, they're asked if they had someone to warn them. And they say, yeah, we did, but we didn't listen.
It's like they're arguing with themselves, full of regret. But, doesn't that contradict the idea that God already knows what's going to happen? If he already knows, like, how can we really have free will?
The concept of free will in Islam, it's complicated. Humans can choose. But God also knows everything that's going to happen.
Right.
It's something that theologians have argued about for centuries. And this chapter doesn't really give us the answers, but it does show that we're responsible for what we decide.
It's a lot to think about. So we've seen what happens to people who don't believe, but what about the people who do choose faith? What happens to them, according to this chapter?
It's important to remember that while Surah Al-Mulk really emphasizes God's power and what happens if you don't believe, mercy and compassion are also really important in Islam.
Yeah, that brings some balance to what we've seen so far. It's not just about punishment.
Right.
Where do we see this mercy in Surah Al-Mulk?
It's kind of woven throughout the chapter, even in the verses that focus on punishment. Like verse 20, it says, "Say, have you considered, should Allah make me perish and those with me? Or else he bestows his mercy on us, who will protect the disbelievers from an agonizing torment."
Interesting. Even when it's talking about what happens to people who don't believe, there's this acknowledgement that God could still show mercy. It's like a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
Even when it's talking about those warnings.
It shows that God's mercy isn't limited. It's always there, even for people who might seem like they deserve to be punished.
And then verse 29 goes even further. Say, He is the compassionate. We have faith in him, and in him we trust. Soon you will know who is in evident error. It's like directly saying that God is compassionate.
Yeah, it's a really powerful statement. It's showing faith and trust, even when the chapter is talking about all these consequences.
So Surah Al-Mulk shows this tension between God's justice and God's mercy. They both exist at the same time, and we get to choose which one we follow.
That's it. You got it. The chapter doesn't shy away from what happens when you reject God, but it also emphasizes that his mercy is always there. It reminds us that God is just and compassionate.
Right, that makes sense. But okay, what about all the good things God gives us, like the earth, everything we need to survive, all that? How does that connect to mercy?
Well, those things are acts of mercy. We can live and thrive and experience creation because of God's compassion.
So it's not just about avoiding punishment. It's about like recognizing all the good things in our lives as gifts, right?
Exactly.
That really changes things.
Yeah, even simple things like breathing, eating, walking around, those are all blessings. And Surah Al-Mulk is like encouraging us to be grateful for them.
If we look at the whole Quran, what does this tell us about justice and mercy and our choices?
Well, this chapter sets the stage. But the rest of the Quran explores these things even more. We see stories of prophets and warnings and descriptions of paradise. It's complicated, but justice and mercy are a big part of it.
It sounds like each chapter adds something new to our understanding, and in the end, it's up to us how we respond to that.
Exactly. The Quran doesn't really give us easy answers. It wants us to think about it and reflect and make choices that line up with what we believe. But we can't forget those last few verses in Surah Al-Mulk.
Oh, you're right. We've talked about power and mercy, but those verses are like a big reminder of all those warnings, right? There's this sense of urgency there.
Yeah, we'll explore those verses and what they mean in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Okay, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Surah Al-Mulk. We've covered so much: God's power, amazing creation, the warnings to those who don't believe, and even those glimpses of mercy. But there's still that feeling of warning,
right?
Like a shadow over those last verses.
Those last few verses, you can't just ignore them. They show us what happens if you reject God.
Yeah.
And they make us think about our own choices.
Yeah. Let's look at them again.
Okay.
Verse 27 says, "But when they see it approaching, the faces of those who disbelieved will turn gloomy, and it will be said, 'This is what you used to call for.'" That's like really powerful imagery.
Yeah, it's that moment of truth when everything becomes clear. And you can't deny what you've done. There's no escaping it.
And then verse 28 says, "Say, have you considered, should Allah make me perish and those with me, or else he bestows his mercy on us, who will protect the disbelievers from an agonizing torment." It's like it's saying God's mercy is still there, but the choice we make is serious.
It is, It reminds us that our decisions matter. We need to think about what we're doing.
Okay, and then we get to verse 30, which is even more direct. "Say, have you considered, if your water drains away, who will bring you pure running water?" Oh, wow, that's such a powerful metaphor.
Yeah, water is like essential for life, right? If it's taken away, it means you've lost God's blessings. You're not protected anymore.
It makes you wonder, like, what if we turn away from God? Who will take care of us then?
Surah Al-Mulk is.
Yeah.
It's forcing us to look at the consequences of what we do.
So now that we've taken this deep dive into Surah Al-Mulk, what are the main things we should remember?
Well, the first thing is, it makes it really clear that God has total power. That's the foundation.
Right.
Everything else comes from that.
What else stands out?
Second, it shows how important our choices are. We can choose to believe or not, to do good or bad, and those choices have consequences.
And we've seen that those consequences are presented pretty vividly.
They are.
But like we said before, there's also that mercy throughout the whole chapter.
Yes, God's mercy is always there, even if you've made mistakes.
Yeah.
But you have to really want to change. You have to turn back to God.
So it's like this balance
Yeah.
between justice and mercy. And it's up to us to figure out how to deal with that.
That's exactly it. Surah Al-Mulk doesn't give us easy answers. It wants us to think about these things and make choices based on what we believe.
This has been amazing exploring Surah Al-Mulk like this. I feel like I understand it so much better now.
It's been great exploring it with you. I hope this deep dive has made you want to keep learning about the Quran.
Oh, it has, for sure. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to read these verses for yourself. Think about what they mean and see how they can help you in your own journey of faith. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.